My love don't give me presents.
Oh, they don't give you presents?
No. I know that she's no peasant. All she ever has to give me, love forever and forever. My love don't give me presents. Turn me on when I get lonely. All my friends tell me that, what is it? That she's only fooling. I know she isn't. Welcome to Guitar Talk. We're going to talk about, let me introduce our guest today. To my left is Stan. Stan is our resident genius and know-it-all when it comes to anything guitar. And to my right is Bob Lippett, who is also a genius, but in other fields. We won't talk about that Sony thing, Bob.
No.
Okay, and today, I'm going to hand it over to Stan, because Stan had an idea about this particular body type and not so much brand, but type of guitar. Take it away, Stan.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Stan Biankiewicz, and I'm a guitar tech. And we're going to talk about the history of electric guitars and to a certain extent. A lot of these electric guitars started off as acoustic guitars, which you can see that they're acoustic. You got the little F holes and stuff. And if you notice, if you can look at the whole guitar, I don't know if we can draw the camera back to see the whole guitar as a unit. There we go. We'll go with the wide shot. There we go.
It's a gorgeous guitar. I really like it.
What you'll notice is this is a violin body with a neck. And the reason they chose the violin body, because in the 20s we were going to be going on tour and we had no electricity. So these bodies, the violin, when you plucked it, was the loudest wood instrument, and it worked off of a bellows kind of a deal. And that...
So these are semi-hollow then?
They started off as full hollows.
Full hollow.
Full hollows, no cutaway, just a full hollow, like you saw my old Epiphone. Is a full hollow body, and it's basically violin, a body on it with a guitar neck. When they went to electric, because those guitars were the ones that projected the best, they put the electronics on those guitars. But as we increased volume, we found that those guitars would feed back. So in the 50s, a few things started to come about. One, solid instruments, to control feedback. All right? Feedback's that squeal that you get when you're sitting at a wedding and the singer in the band stands in front of the speaker a little too close, and all of a sudden, well, this is what would happen when you got
moments?
When you got one of these hollows, inclusive of the flat top acoustic. That's why they make plugs, and you can
So
you
the
can
feedback
fill them up.
would be coming from what? It was so open.
The fact that there is an opening.
Okay, it was so open that it was pushing more volume than the pickup could take.
No, it was feeding back like a microphone because the body was reacting like a microphone.
Okay,
it was resonating against like a microphone.
So that's almost like a sympathetic thing.
So now, if we cover the holes on these, but they didn't figure that out yet.
Move on.
Being sympathetic.
They figured that out in the late 50s. But one of the things they want to do in the 50s, besides make a solid, because the solids didn't quite have the hollow
Well,
vibe.
Just think of it, Stan. Something this size, solid piece of wood, will weigh about 30 pounds.
Well, that's why they
this thing weighs, as it is, like 8 pounds or so.
Well,
right?
that's why they minimized the solid body, was to get it smaller for lighter weight. What we figured out is if we hollowed out the body but didn't put the F holes in. Now, if you look at B.B. King's guitar, even though his guitar is just like my red one over here. This is an ES335, the one Bob is holding. That's an ES335, and that's got a solid block of wood down the center.
Yeah, that's heavier, believe it or not. It's a little bit smaller than mine, or almost the same size, and there's a difference in weight. Yeah. His is heavier.
They came up with two models of a thinner version, this being the second, the higher priced of the two from Gibson. They made an ES125T, and all this one guitar has been modified. It was in a repossession mode. Someone took a claw hammer to it, and I couldn't bring it back to its original finish, so I painted it gold to mimic another model that Gibson made called the ES295, but the 295 was thicker, like an ES175. So you can see how thin these bodies are, and they thought if they made them thinner, they would still have that acoustic vibe when you plugged them in, yet they would control feedback. And around
Well, you can hear it here. I mean, it rings.
Yeah.
Just like it's almost like an acoustic guitar. Basically, you can play it. I mean, they ring.
They in getting towards
It's been
1957, because these were invented in, let's say, 1954. In 1957, they made this model, the one Bob has, that red one, and they go, let's make a double cutaway. All right,
because it's a 57.
That's in 57. That guitar came out actually more towards early 58, I think it was the actual
What a
pronounced
good-looking
date.
guitar. I mean, who would you have seen playing this?
Oh, Chuck Berry, everybody. Pretty Woman, what's his name?
Orbison.
Roy Orbison played one.
Yeah, BB.
There was a bunch of people that played those. God,
So this was like
Eric
top of the
Clapton,
line when it came out.
I've seen pictures with Andy Summers with those. They're very popular.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Jazz box guitar.
Yeah.
BB King plays one of those. What was the other? There was another blues guy. Otis Rush plays one of those.
So these were very popular then.
Yes,
At the time they came out.
and the players liked the double cutaway, and what they did on this hollow is they didn't make it hollow. Believe it or not, underneath the pickups, going underneath the bridge and the tailpiece, there's a block of wood.
And you could feel it when you hold it.
And you can feel it when you hold it. Yeah,
Yep.
and that was to reduce feedback. If you look at BB's current Lucille, they eliminated the F-holes on the guitar. They eliminated the F-holes on the guitar. Point to the F-holes, Bob.
Point to the
top,
F-holes,
top
Bob.
F-hole or bottom F-hole.
Very good,
Them
Bob.
effing holes,
And
man.
by-
No effing holes.
Those effing holes, when you got rid of them, would remove feedback. If you look at old Gretches from the early 60s, you'll notice that this cutout was replaced with a decal.
Yeah,
and
you could
again,
see 'em, yeah,
it was
yeah.
for feedback reasons.
Who
Well,
plays that? The guy in the Stray Cats plays a huge one.
Yeah, he
Big
plays a
white
bunch
one.
of them. He plays a 6120, which is a Chet Atkins model. He also has a white Falcon, which is that big white.
Chet Atkins. Now, what was Chet? Was Chet Atkins playing something similar to this, or
No, he was playing something similar to this.
to that?
Yeah, a 6120 is basically this with Filtertron, or depending on what year, a DeArmond single coil. So if you look at George Harrison's guitar, he doesn't have Gretsch pickups in there. He has DeArmonds. DeArmond was a big pickup company that made pickups for both Guild and Gretsch until the late 50s, when Gretsch hired a guy named Ray Butts. Sorry, I don't mean to keep on going back to butts. Everything's
Well, it's a
everything's about the
fixation with you anyway.
everything's about the anal
Not a
track,
butt- not a
especially
butt
after you get
joke.
over 50.
Yeah.
You know, you get the
Go ahead.
40. You know, you get that KY with.
All right. It's now turned
It's
into-
not for nothing. It's the Guitar Talk show. So, because of the popularity of the double cutaway with the solid block in there, they thought that this guitar, my gold one here, would improve in sales.
All right, this is 50s. What?
This is 58.
58.
But in 1960, because of the popularity of the double cutaway red guitar, they made a totally hollow version of the 335, and they called it the ES 330. This model went from the ES 225 versus the ES 125T. This is the ES 225, and this went over to that shape, which Matt's holding right now. And that one in particular that you're looking at is Epiphone's version of the ES 330. The reason you recognize this guitar so well is because it's the infamous Beatles guitar.
John?
All the Beatles, including
But especially
Paul McCartney.
John.
Paul McCartney had
What was his?
John
what was
Lennon
his?
definitely played.
John
Yeah.
Lennon played one, and he stripped the.
He stripped the finish.
He
Yes.
stripped the finish. Why did he do that?
Because he believed the guitar sounded better with the stripped finish.
So he thought
He
that
not only stripped
with
the
the
finish of
finish,
that
it was muffling the sound.
Well, he had refinished his Rickenbacker more than once, and he noticed when playing it unfinished, it sounded better, and it does. Unfortunately, it puts the guitar in a death cycle because the finish helps protect against dehydration and the wood over drying. The wood needs to remain supple in these instruments,
Right.
otherwise you're going to even. And then here's something that you probably all don't know. When they originally made these guitars, they were like violins. They actually had a carved spruce top with well, fiddleback maple or curly maple back and sides. They found that due to feedback, they started gluing pieces of wood. Now, these tops were hand carved.
That's to change the tone?
No, to stop the feedback.
To stop the feedback.
So they were glue pieces of wood underneath these the tops. So they would mute the top. So now it wasn't a good acoustic, and it was gnarly electric. And then for ease of play, Gibson, after 1946, shortened the guitar. The standard acoustic is 25.5 scale, like a Fender. Fender kept the old scale. He goes, I don't know why they did it, but when they did it, they darkened their guitars, and they lost a lot of brightness. So instead of making
darken meaning not color, darkening in tone.
Clarity.
Clarity.
Okay. So now,
clarity.
In certain rooms, you'd find that these guitars would mumble. Where Fender said that's a silly thing, but that's another story for another guitar talk. So what they did to compensate the mumbling problem and the fact that they were hand carving the tops, all these guitars that you look at right now are all plywood. All plywood.
But they are laid up plywood.
They're maple lamb.
Right.
The difference between a lamb and plywood is there is no knot holes in lamb. Plywood has knot hole fills and all kinds of stuff. Plywood's made for durability minus the cosmetics. Laminates are with the cosmetics. So you can get like what they call a side A plywood, an AB plywood kind of a thing,
right.
where the outside
Finish.
is more finish
right.
ready piece.
I used to see guys, old time carpenters. They always had rolls of laminate, and they would do their finish work like kitchen cabinetry and stuff like that. They'd use laminate.
Yeah.
And if you didn't put the laminate on perfectly, it would do what they call delam.
Oh yeah.
And once the moisture gets under one of those and starts delaminating and curls back, you're screwed.
That delamination also, just so you know, and Mr. Lippett, who repairs amplifiers, will attest to this. The old circuit boards, they were laminates, and if not treated properly, they can delam. And then what do you got to do? You got to solder little wires in between the lambs, right? Tell us about delaminating.
All right, don't go into detail on nothing, Bob. It's okay. Just nod your head. Ready? Nod your head. Okay.
That's right, Bob. Right?
That's right. Okay.
So
this is the expert here, Bob.
And I'm going to just talk on his behalf. They have to solder these little wires in, right, Bob?
Right.
Okay. Now that we get that out of the way, I like the I don't know. It's not confusing so much as it's an easy question. Do these come? Is one of the features being able to put a Bigsby on this? Can you order it with a Bigsby?
In the old days, you could order them with Bigsbys. This is how we used to bend strings, is with the Bigsby,
right.
Because light gauge strings in the 50s was 12s. 10s, 9s, and 8s weren't invented till after the pedal steel, and that kind of made the Strat tremolo and the Bigsby tremolo kind of out of whack, because now you could bend the string as opposed to using the Bigsby. And the reason they wanted to bend with their fingers is because of the pedal steel, because the Bigsby would bend them all.
There's still some sounds you can't get without a Bigsby, though.
Or without a Strat tremolo. So
right.
They work. The Strat's just being more. The Strat tremolo is much more, much more sensitive and effective, to the point where when you bend the string, as you can see, the Bigsby's not, the arm of the Bigsby isn't moving, but the Strat arm would, because it's a flex system and there's more string angle, so that the Strat sustains better, but the fault of the Strat is you can't do a lick like this without this string going flat. And even with the Bigsby, you can kind of hear it wanting to go, but because there's so much string space, it's less effective, less sensitive. That's why when we stopped bending strings with the tremolo on a Strat, they block them up to be a fixed bridge.
All right, now in that particular year, did they come stock? Did the Bigsby come stock on those?
No, this guitar actually came with the big Les Paul style designed tailpiece that combined both, if you look at Matt's guitar, both the bridge and the tailpiece as one. So I had that, but I ended up selling it. I wanted a Bigsby, and I wanted a floating bridge as this stands.
So they're not stock then? Was it an option?
No.
Was it an option
no, but,
of those years?
Yeah, it was an option all years.
Okay.
What did change was if you look at Bob's guitar, Bob, hold it straight up and down like this so we don't have to see your face. When you look
Say
at
what
Bob's
you really
guitar,
mean.
you see this? This is a Tune-o-matic, okay? And then we have a stop bar tailpiece versus Mattola's guitar, which has what they call, we're waiting for code. And there we go.
Action.
This is, if we go down a little lower, code, appreciate it. Or, yeah, there we go. This is a trapeze tailpiece. Now, if you go back to my camera, and you can see that there's very little string angle on this one. All right, now, Bob, do your same thing with your 335. And if you look at the side of the back of the 335, there's a lot more string angle coming from the tailpiece.
Yeah, it's a little more severe than yours. It looks.
Yeah, to go sideways,
See
there
it?
we go. And then
You're talking about here, right?
the string angle, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
How about
there's
mine?
your sustain.
How about mine?
See, you have very little, just like me. You
Yeah.
have a little more than I do.
Yeah.
Okay? So,
Well, it's that way about everything. So.
when they designed the 335,
I have a little more than
they
that.
originally put that stop bar tailpiece like Bob has. But then in like 1961, they put the trapeze because it looks jazzier. But when they did it, all the players went, where did the sustain go? Because all the sustain came from the stop bar tailpiece, because sustain comes from string angle. And when you don't have it, you don't have the sustain. So in Matt's case, in my case on the 335 to gain sustain, I can adjust that stop tailpiece. Matt can't adjust his stop tailpiece. So if he wants to increase sustain, or if I want to increase sustain in my Bigsby load, I got to go to bigger strings. What gauge are your strings, Matt?
You put them on.
They're 10s.
10s.
What gauge are these strings?
Oh, God, those are what?
12s.
12s?
Yeah,
12s?
so now what I want you to do is just swap with me for a second.
Okay.
Just watch the headstock of Bob's.
Yes, sir.
Now, they're 12s. Now play my guitar. Do they feel like 12s?
Not really. They're a little heavier. You can
You can
hear
feel
it.
that they're a little heavier, but now bend the string. Bend one of the top strings. Does it feel that much harder to bend?
It's more substantial, I'll tell you that. You can feel that. You can feel it's more substantial. Those are easier on my fingers.
Now,
that's why
the
I use them.
reason he can bend on this guitar and not have a problem is because this bridge is actually drilled into the body. Now, let me swap guitars again. This bridge sits on top of the body.
So that's a floating.
This is a
almost.
floating bridge.
Right.
And if I don't have enough string pressure and I do this and bend the string, the bridge moves.
The bridge moves, yeah.
And if I hit it too hard and I don't have the right gauge string, the bridge moves. That's why.
Wouldn't that tend to knock you out of tune a lot as well?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So you have to have the proper gauge strings, because the only way you can do it, because you can't adjust how much string angle there is. And then Paul took away some string angle, so there's less friction, so the system stays in tune better. And now it doesn't sustain as much. So what
I was
happened
wondering
was,
about the sustain. That was a complaint of Jimmy Page. When they interviewed him in the late '60s, early '70s, they were asking him about his violin, bow on the guitar. He was looking for sustain. He said.
Yeah.
Now I didn't understand exactly what it meant until just recently, but he wanted the note to sustain itself. Self-explanatory.
well, being
he wanted
that
to hold.
Archtop guitars
Resonate.
were violin
Resonate.
bodies with guitar necks, they have the same problem violins do. They don't sustain because they work off of bellows, whereas a flat top guitar keeps on fluttering and contains the sustain. So to sustain a violin
let me
would be
ask you-
to bow it, just like these
Yeah,
guitars.
this
They-
is maybe a weird question, but why are some artists so interested in sustain on playing? Why What's the reason behind it?
Well, if they want to hold a note for 4 bars, the guitar's got to be able to do it.
Okay,
and if the guitar doesn't want to do it, then after 4 bars, there's one thing that's going to happen with sustain is we are in tempered tuning. We play half-assed equally well in all keys, perfect in none. If you have perfect pitch, eventually you'll want to quit playing the instrument because it'll never sound in tune to you.
Right.
The
I have
best
a
you
friend
can
like
do-
that. It drives him crazy. He puts the guitar aside.
Yeah, I've worked for a guy like that. The guy who used to play for Bob Dylan, I used to be one of his employees. And he had perfect pitch. And that's a tangent on another story. But the reason, what kills sustain is the fact that we're not completely in tune. So I'm going to give you a little story. I was in Los Angeles, and there was this guy in Chicago that would make fretboards that you could actually remove from your guitar, and you could actually put the proper key you want to play in. So if you want a key of C fretboard, you put a key of C fretboard in, now you play in the key of C. There's a separate fret for each string. Each string has their own first
I've never
fret.
seen that.
Each string has its own second, and it looks like someone put little tiny pieces of fret in a shotgun shell, and about 10 feet away, shot it into this piece of wood. But
How interesting is that?
He hit a C chord on a nylon string. Just went like this. And he goes, listen to sustain. Well, my knees were going like that. I had to go to the bathroom. I went to the bathroom. I went to the bathroom, people. Took a number 1. Washed my hands with soap and water. Came out of the bathroom. He's still holding the cord. And I asked the guy, what else happened? He goes, nothing. He's still holding the cord.
No, that's going a little overboard. You don't need that much sustain.
No, believe it or not, that's you can gain a whole minute of sustain when the instrument is in perfect tune and each note rides on the frequency that was dictated by the laws of physics.
Think about it, though. It's almost like there's only one real old piece of music that I can think of where sustain came into play, and it was very important. It was the start of one of Mozart's pieces. He started on like just a simple bass line, and then it got slower and slower, and then way above it there was an oboe, and the note rang out, and it just rang for about 15, 20 seconds. Something like that I can understand.
That's iron lungs.
But the songs we play.
See, we can't blow into this instrument
Well,
to
that's
make
the
it
thing. But the
go
songs
longer.
we play, I think people would lose interest if.
The issue of sustain is this: how much do we really need? So in other words, if we're backing up a person like Barbara Streisand, 4 bars of sustain we could use because she's holding that freaking note that long. But how many singers do that?
Well, does
I want to get back to.
the amplification help with the sustain?
No, because it's the notes interacting with themselves. Now you can force the sustain out of the amplifier, but that's not the guitar naturally doing it. You're working it.
All right, you got 4 minutes.
Well,
keep going.
I want to get into the last thing. Again, back to this being a floating bridge. So Merle Travis, I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he was a big finger style. Travis Picking, yeah. He was a big finger style guy. This is more Chet Atkins. Merle was more of a quarter note. And he would do a little more fancier stuff. But Merle noticed that if he hit the guitar too hard, this would move. And if he tried to bend the string and surprise, even using the right strings. Now remember, these guys are using things like 14 gauge strings.
God, I can't
15s.
imagine. It makes my fingers hurt just thinking about it.
That's all right. If you try them, it's not as bad as you think.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening was if he surprised the guitar and bent the string, this would move. So he went to his motorcycle mechanic, who was a modifier, kind of like the way Eddie Van Halen met Sammy Hagar at his Ferrari mechanic. And he went up to his motorcycle mechanic. He goes, you're a pretty good engineering kind of guy. Could you invent a device that would bend strings this way so the bridge wouldn't have to move either of these directions? So the mood. And Paul Bigsby, his motorcycle mechanic, did. And that's what this was used for, was for bending strings. And if you listen to even the late 50s.
So that's why it's named Bigsby, because of his name?
Yep.
Kind of like the guy that invented the toilet.
Yeah,
Same thing.
yeah, John Crapper.
Thomas
yeah,
Crapper.
going to John
Thomas-
or you go John.
Thomas-
It was John Crapper.
It was Thomas Crapper.
Thomas Crapper. How did we get
Thomas
John
Crapper.
out of the deal?
It's like the Earl of Sandwich.
How do we get the John out of the deal?
don't
This
know.
is guitar talk, not toilet talk. Get your mouth out of the toilet. Get your mouth out of the
All
toilet.
right,
This
all
is
right,
guitar
all
talk.
right, all right.
So Paul Bigsby, and then if you listen to, because what Leo Fender did was when he invented the Jazz Master, he went to a different tremolo system. He invented a system that was similar to a Bigsby, worked with the spring internally as opposed to exposed like a Bigsby. And a lot of these systems would have like a movable bridge where it kind of rock back and forth, kind of a deal, to help them stay in tune. And and if you listen to Safaris and even Setzer, they bend strings.
You can't do any venture music without one of those.
You know, so.
Well, they had Mose rates. What did Mose rate use?
And Mose Wright did the same thing. And he used basically, he redefined the Bigsby and tried doing something else.
That's what I'm talking about. That sound right there. I mean, you can remember that. I can remember being 8, 9 years old hearing that music. I loved it immediately.
And that's using a
Surf
tremolo
music, yeah.
system. That's the way a tremolo was designed to be used. Not for what Jimi Hendrix did, but then when we invented the skinny strings, we didn't need the Bigsby anymore or the tremolo on the Strat. So people
So
like
now
Jimi
it's an
Hendrix.
anachronism, but I think it's gorgeous. I think it's great looking on a
So
guitar.
Jimmy blocked his up like Eddie Van Halen, just tightened the springs so it wouldn't move when he bent the strings, and he could just go down on his. Same thing with Eddie, and they would get a little more sustain, and they
sustain.
came and created new tricks with the tremolo. Other than it's just like with the pedal steel, we bent strings with a lever, and now we skinnied up the strings on the guitars so we could bend them with our fingers, and we put
All
bigger
right.
frets in for leverage. And on that note, I think I'm
We're
going to
gonna
end.
play out.
I'm going to end the rest of it. What do you want to do? You want to do? Let's do that.
See you next time. Hope you enjoyed it. We sure did. Da-da-da-da-da-da. I love that sound.